Why, hello there, 8th grade math students. So yesterday you guys did an activity where you used tracing paper to reflect or flip an image across different axes, the X and the Y. So today you guys are going to take notes on how to do that, including the note cards you should have on your desks. If you do not have 2 note cards on your desk, please pause the video and go talk to Mrs. Stevens or Mrs. Litzel about getting a set of note cards. Okay, so before we start our notes and our note cards, I want to give you guys a little bit of information about reflections. So reflections are flips. And oftentimes in class, I'll call them reflection or flips. I need you guys to know both. So it's when we flip a figure across the x-axis, which is our side-to-side one, or our y-axis, which is our up and down one. So let's look a little bit about what happens when we take an image like this triangle and we reflect it. So I've got this triangle and I'm going to reflect it or flip it over the x-axis. So if we look right now, when I'm in the x-axis, when my triangle is in this quadrant, quadrant 3, my numbers in the y on the x-axis are negative and my numbers on the y-axis are negative. So all of my numbers and my coordinates will be negative. Let's see what happens when I flip it over my x-axis. When I flip the triangle over the x-axis, my x numbers are still negative, but now my numbers in the y-axis are positive. So when we took our figure here and flipped it over the x-axis, the numbers on the y-axis became opposite. Let's see what happens when we flip it over the y. So right now my x numbers are negative and my y numbers are positive. So actually I have to move it here in order to reflect it with my button. So let's go back and look at our numbers. So right now when I'm here, both my x numbers and my y numbers are positive. So when I reflect, my x numbers became negative and my y numbers stayed the same. So depending on which axis we flip over, certain numbers are going to become the opposite. So now you guys need your note cards. If you need to pause the video to get ready, go ahead. We're going to start off taking note cards and what happens when we reflect over the x-axis. So this up here is going to go on the front of your card. I don't care if that's the lined side or the blank side. But either way, you're going to need to pause and write reflecting over the x-axis. These note cards are to be used to study from. Okay, now that you've written this on the front, on the back, we're going to write the y becomes opposite. And we've given you an example down here. So if we started out with the y being positive and we reflected over the x-axis, the y becomes opposite, which means it's negative. So here, our y value was negative, and when we reflected over the x-axis, our y value became positive. So you might need to pause that so you can write that down. I'm going to keep moving. Pause if you need to. So we didn't just learn about reflecting over the x-axis, we also have to take notes on reflecting over the y-axis. So again, this is going to go on the front of a second note card, a different note card. And on the back, you're going to talk about what happens to the coordinates when we reflect over the x-axis or y-axis. So when we reflect over the y-axis, it's the x value that becomes opposite. So for example, if this is my original coordinate and my x value is 4, when I reflect over the y-axis, it becomes the opposite, which is negative. Here, my x value was my x value is negative 2. So when I reflect over the y-axis, it becomes the opposite, which is positive 2. Again, you may need to pause this to write it down, but I'm going to keep going. So pause and rewind as needed. So here we have an example. We have this triangle. We have triangle NZT. Let me write that down. Triangle NZT. Now you could call this triangle ZTN, TZN, whatever you want to call it, but you do need this triangle symbol out in front. And we have these directions to reflect across the x-axis. So anytime you guys are going to deal with a transformation, you need to start out by listing your original coordinates. So the coordinates of n are 4, 0. Okay, the coordinates of z are 1, -4. And the coordinates of t are 3, -4. So we always start out by writing our original coordinates. So these are called this one here, since it's our original, is called the pre-image. Now, once we reflect it, it's going to be called the image, and we indicate that by putting these symbols here. We can also call this prime. So we've got z prime, n prime, and t prime. So now if I refer back to my note card, since I'm reflecting across the x-axis, reflecting over the x-axis, the y value is the one becomes opposite. So my x is going to stay the same and my y is going to become opposite, but 0 doesn't have an opposite, so n is actually going to stay the same. Okay, for z, my x stays the same, my y becomes opposite, so the opposite of -4 is 4. For t, my x stays the same, and my y becomes opposite, so -4 becomes 4. We come over here and we plot these points. So I've still got one at 4, 0. Then I've got one at 1, 4, and one at 3, 4. And you guys should be able to tell when you're done drawing it if you truly did it correctly. This is a reflection over the y-axis. Okay, now we're going to do an example where we reflect over the y-axis. So again, this is my image, my pre-image. And I've got triangle KZT, so I'm going to list my original coordinates. So K is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 5, -3. Z is 2, -4. And T is 5, -4. So these are the coordinates of the original pre-image right here. Now, to graph the image, we need to list the new coordinates. So look at these little apostrophes are going to show us that these are the new image coming. So I'm going to refer back to my note cards here. This time we're reflecting over the y-axis. So when I reflect over the y-axis, the x becomes opposite. So I'm not going to touch the y. So this is going to stay -3 in the y, but now the 5 is going to become -5. The z, I'm not going to touch the y, so it stays -4, but the x becomes negative. T, I'm not going to touch the y, I'm only touching the x, and this is going to become the opposite. So now I've got -5, -3, -2, -4, and -5, -4. So again, when you guys are done drawing, you should be able to tell, did I truly reflect this over the right axis? And if you didn't, then you just go back and you do it and flip the other ones. Okay, in the interest of time, we're going to skip a couple of these examples right here to where we describe the rule. So this time, they give us the pre-image and the image. Notice they put these little apostrophes. They want us to write the rule. So I look here and I can see that my picture was flipped over the x-axis. So we would write reflect over x-axis. Reflect over x. Okay, this one is a little bit harder to see, but I'm not coming up here over the x-axis. I am flipping across the y-axis. So here we have my pre-image, and in blue with the tick marks, I have my image. So this one is a reflect over the y-axis. And you guys are going to have some questions like this on your worksheet that you're going to do tonight and that you will finish for homework if you do not get done. So again, here I didn't switch over my y-axis. I went over my x-axis. So this would be a reflect over the x. And that's the last example. So if you found at any point any of these confusing, make sure you go back and rewatch the video. Also, while you're doing your worksheet, if you need a refresher course, watch an example on how to do either of the reflections. Thank you for watching. Please be really good for your sub, watch your volume levels, and work on your worksheet. What you don't finish is homework. Have a great night, and I'll see you guys in a little less than a week.